starting off my picks of the week with Netflix. Again, Netflix, just like last week, they have not added much. I don't know, June is just sort of a dead month for Netflix, so it's very, very difficult to find really good recommendations. So I'm starting off with Taking Lives. I know a lot of you have probably seen it, and it's an okay serial killer hunt type of a movie. But with that, if you have not seen it, it's definitely one you should watch. To me, it seemed like one of those movies a lot of people would have passed on. They feel like they've seen Angelina Jolie enough. You know, it just looked passable. It looked like you could pass it up, and it really is pretty solid. Like, it's got a big twist in it. It's gonna feel a little bit dated at this point because it is over 10 years old now. But if you love a good murder mystery and you just like never saw this one, it's definitely a good way to go. Another one to watch this week that I have not gotten around to watching, but I'm recommending it this week only because it's Father's Day week, and that's Kodachrome. This is actually a Netflix original, and I don't like recommending movies I haven't seen, but I have heard good things about it. But it's got Ed Harris in it. Basically, he plays what appears to be like an absentee father that is now like trying to sort of bond with his son, and it looks pretty good. It's really not my type of movie. It's not the type of thing I would normally recommend, and the only reason I'm recommending it is because it is Father's Day weekend coming up, so that would make that one a good one to go with. But also, the Netflix well is running dry. Hopefully they have a much better July than they've had in June. But if you're listening to this maybe for the first time and you're like, what is he talking about? There's plenty of good stuff on Netflix. I've recommended all of it. Maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe I recommend too many movies. I have a list of 10 Netflix movies every single week in addition to my picks of the week, and then I tend to do another video on Friday usually that recommends multiple platforms, movies across multiple platforms, and Netflix is always in the mix, and so I'm really exhausting that resource. Amazon Prime did do a better job of adding movies in June. They added a lot of good stuff. A couple of Kurt Russell movies. I'm always a big fan of Kurt Russell. One of them, Stargate. Another old one. I know most people that would care about Stargate have probably seen it, but it's really accessible. Like, they made, the sort of the Sci-Fi Channel series. I believe that's what network it played on. I'm sure somebody will correct me, but that show's pretty nerdy, and in a sense that, like, it's for a niche market, whereas the movie is a little bit more accessible, where like anybody could kind of watch it. It's a pretty cool flick. It's not what you would expect to see. If you never saw it, I highly recommend it. If it's been a while since you saw it, it just got added recently, which is why I feel comfortable recommending it. I might do a full review on this later this week. I've not written a script for it, so I'm not ready to like go ahead and film that, but it might be my review for Thursday this week on the YouTube channel. But it's a movie called Braven, and it is a cool, of course, Jason Momoa. I don't know why I couldn't remember Jason Momoa's name. He's Aquaman in the new DC movies. But Braven is a little action movie. Basically, some drug lords of some sort use his cabin as like his property as like a stash house, and he ends up kind of in a shootout with them, and then it kind of, then it like escapes, and it sort of looks like it's an action movie, and it's a new release. It's on Amazon Prime, but it feels kind of like cliffhanger in a lot of ways. You're out in the snow, and he seems to be like, he's a very capable person just for sort of defending himself. So it's cool. It's got some good elements to it. He's really sort of blowing up. This one really flew in under the radar. I think it was even available to like stream, like rent while it was in like a limited theater release. I feel like maybe had they kind of waited, or maybe if Aquaman was a little more popular in the DC movie, or if that movie had done better, this would have gotten a wider release. But they went ahead and released it maybe a little early. But he's on the verge. He's got some things in the cooker that are probably going to be pretty solid, including a remake of The Crow, which is not officially happening yet, but apparently he's on board and that's going to happen. I think he'd be really good for that, whether the movie's good or not. But the movie's solid, so check out Braven. I might be talking about that later this week. And then Hulu, believe it or not, I got a couple of recommendations on Hulu that beat what I've got on Netflix right now. One of them is Apollo 13. Great week to watch that. They just released the trailer for First Man, I believe it's called, with Ryan Gosling, where he's playing Neil Armstrong. But Apollo 13 is really one of the better real-life space exploration movies you can watch. Apollo 13 is so cool for a number of reasons. One, it's just an incredible story. It's one of the most incredible stories of the 20th century. And then two, they really did film it in anti-gravity, and you can tell the entire time. They might be on wires a couple of times, but for the most part, and I don't know if they are at all, they might be 100% anti-gravity. But essentially, they had this set built on this plane they call the Vomit Comet, and they use it in training, but they had the set, parts of the set of the shuttle built on it. They would go up in this plane and then just do a free fall, which causes weightlessness within the plane itself and the set. So they had about 2 minutes, maybe just shy of 2 minutes of weightlessness for these takes. And it's a long movie. There are a lot of weightlessness scenes. So that's a really epic filming process. So that alone is worth watching, but it is just an incredible movie at the end of the day. Ron Howard directed it. It's one of his better movies, and he's a great director. And then another really cool movie that I know a lot of people have seen, but just like Taking Lives, just like my recommendation there, this is one of those ones, if you always missed it or passed it, you really should watch it, and that is The Quick and the Dead. Really cool Western that came out of the late 90s. Leonardo DiCaprio's in it, Sharon Stone, Russell Crowe, Gene Hackman, huge cast, and it's got this cool, almost like comic booky kind of a vibe, in an era where we didn't really have movies like that. We had all these really great westerns in the 60s and 70s, and they fizzled out and they died out. And then somewhere in the 90s, they just come up with this really cool sort of like pulpy, fantasy almost type action western movie where when people get shot, you can see the hole straight through them. I mean, it's just cool, fun stuff like that. If you know what you're getting into, it's a lot of fun. I've watched this one a bunch. The reason I think a lot of you have seen it is because it used to run on like TBS all the time. If you missed it, definitely go back and check that one out. It's one of the better movies you can currently watch on Hulu right now. As far as HBO goes, A Cure for Wellness is a somewhat new release. It came out last year. It is a really cool, creepy movie. It's done by the same director as like the early Pirates of the Caribbean movies. But this one is a rated R. It's not science fiction, but sort of like fantasy thriller. It takes place in an insane asylum, and it's got some really, really incredible visuals. Now, as far as the storytelling goes, for me, gets a little bit muddy, could have been a little bit better in places, but that said, it's still a really cool movie watching experience, and it's very dissimilar from anything else, so I highly recommend it for that. If anything, it's a little bit long, so watch it when you have, you know, some time to kill. Watch it in an evening where you're not busy, but I recommend it. I enjoyed watching it. And then in oldie but a goodie, I'll just stick with two sort of like horror themed movies for HBO, because I don't have a theme this week. It's just slim pickings, and I was not able to develop a theme with my list. But Identity is one I've always liked. I say I've always liked it. I bought it like a $5 bin 10 years ago. I don't think I've ever unwrapped it. I think I've even seen it since I bought it somewhere else. But that said, cool movie about strangers sort of meeting up at a motel out in the desert, and they start getting picked off one by one. So it's got horror elements, it's got mystery elements, all the good stuff, everything you want to see, and it's got a good twist in it. It might not blow your mind because a twist without blowing it, it might be a little bit dated. But that said, it is a fun watch, and it's a much shorter watch than A Cure for Wellness. So I do recommend that. I gotta say, on rentals, I hate to do this, but there is nothing releasing this week worth watching that I know of. It's a bunk week for that. On that note, I mentioned this movie last week, and it is available for rent somewhat recently, so it is a new release. Game Night, way funnier than I thought it was going to be. I mean, I don't know, I just didn't have high expectations for it. I really just kind of wanted to turn my brain off on Friday night last week, and we rented it and just loved it. We had a ball with it. I said this last week, I don't know why, but Jason Bateman, I like all his movies. I think I end up liking all of them. I can't think of one I don't like, so I don't know why I didn't expect to like this one. I really, really liked it. If you missed that recommendation, I am at least giving you some sort of a rental recommendation for this week. And in the theater, The Incredibles 2 is going to be the pick of the week. There's nothing else to pick from. That's the big movie. I always really like the original. It stands out to me as one of the better Pixar movies for me, for my taste, because it is kind of an action movie. You kind of get this retro spy, almost like 60s James Bond with superpowers kind of a thing. I really, really dug that vibe of the original one, so I'm hoping they retain that. The trailers are showing a lot of the dad babysitting the baby and stuff going haywire. I'm hoping that's just a portion of the movie and that's not half of the movie. We'll see, but it should be good, even though I will say Pixar sequels, rarely are they as good as the original. Very rarely. There's only a few exceptions. So those are my picks of the week. So this segment is actually from my weekly podcast that I put out every single Monday. If you like this video and you're new here, definitely click that subscribe button and click the little bell icon, because subscribing without it basically means nothing on YouTube now. But you'll get tons of movie recommendations every single week. It'll almost be impossible for you to run out of things to watch on Netflix, Amazon Prime, and other streaming services. But videos like this one, I'll keep making them as long as you keep watching them. But thanks for watching this one, and you will see me next time.